How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be working on my Scion XB. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. This is my daily driver, and what we're going to be doing today is doing a coolant change slash, I guess you would call it a semi-flush. I'm going to show you the quick, easy way for me to do it. But before we get into that, if you do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, to see some content that I don't have up here on YouTube, you can follow our links in the description below on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Let's get into this. To give you a brief overview, this is my daily driver, beater, whatever you want to call it, Scion XB. I bought this car for a really good deal, and actually I bought it for a fair deal, but it was highly modded. I put it back to stock, and after I sold off all the parts, this car is really cheap. And to kind of show why I kind of like these kind of cars is the fact that they are a very solid, reliable car. This is the fourth one I've owned. I've owned them on and off since 2004, so this is my fourth one. First gen, and then I've had one second gen for a short time. But yeah, this car I've had since 2019. I bought it with 145-ish thousand miles, and I did a lot of the 30K maintenance, 30,000 mile maintenance at 150. We're now at 180,000-ish miles, so it's time to do some of the maintenance. And thing a lot of people forget is to do all the fluids. So in the previous videos, I've shown you a DIY on how to do your oil change, and then I also showed you how to do the transmission fluid drain and refill on the manual transmission. It's real easy. It's 2 bolts. So on this car today, I wanted to do the coolant change. I'm not going to do a full coolant flush as it makes a mess everywhere, but the coolant that I've seen in the reservoir tank still looks pretty clean. So what I want to do is drain, fill it up with distilled water, let it run, cycle in, and then drain the distilled water, and then top it off with fresh coolant. Generally, I recommend distilled water because it doesn't have the minerals and all that in it, so you don't have any calcium buildup. But just as a disclaimer, my XB is a little different than most stock XBs. I have an upgrade rater 1. 2, a lot of the under paneling that's on the car is missing. The car came like that, so the instructions I give you, there may be a couple more steps in the process of like using a 10mm to take a bunch of bolts off and some of the paneling off. I forget what it looks like underneath here, but from what I remember, it's missing a lot of bolts or panels and little nuts and stuff. So should be real easy to access. But let me go ahead and get this up on race ramp so I have some room to work underneath and get it all prepped, and I'll be right back. Every time I do any maintenance on the car, whether it's oil changes or any other maintenance, I like to just do a quick visual inspection, make sure there's no, wet seepage of oil or anything. Everything's pretty dry here. I apologize on the engine bay being really dirty. I haven't washed or cleaned this thing in forever, and honestly, it's a daily. I drive it like I don't care. So yeah, some of the tools that you're gonna need, well, at least for my situation, is obviously a drain pan. I have one specifically that I use for coolant and fluid, like water-based fluids. Any oils, I have another drain pan for oil changes and other fluid changes, but this one's specifically for coolant. A nice clean funnel. I just rinsed this one off. It was used for coolant before. It was just real dusty, so excuse that being wet. And I have an extra pan here just in case this one gets full. I forget the capacity of this. I think it's a gallon. That's about a gallon-ish, but just to make sure. And then obviously you're going to need coolant. The Scion XB requires 1 gallon, so this is good. And like I said, I'm going to run it once with distilled water in there just to help clean everything out and drain it again. Distilled water can be had for about $1-ish per gallon. But let's take a look underneath to show you where I need to open up my radiator. Please excuse all the background noise. The gardeners are here. So this is the underside of my XB. There's the oil filter. My radiator drain is right here. So all you gotta do is just turn that and let it drain. The main part is we want to turn it. You do want to go slow. My preferred method is let it drip. Takes a little longer because if you open it all at once, it's just gonna get everywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and get started. Oh, also, you're gonna need a lot of towels if you're as messy as I am. Also, before you start draining, you wanna open this radiator cap. Just as a word of advice, make sure your car's cool. Make sure the fluids aren't hot, because if you do open it and it's hot, it's gonna spray everywhere and you can severely injure yourself. So I'm doing a DIY on my car. please take caution on your car. As you can see, it's draining at a fairly quick, fairly decent rate. Made a little bit of a mess, but didn't want to make too much of a mess, so I just have it. I still have the plug on, so it's just going around the plug. Removing the drain plug, I actually came across a issue. Thankfully, I'm doing the maintenance and came across this so I can replace it. If you see here, the O-ring is completely rotted out. So I went to local auto parts store to pick up some O-rings. Unfortunately, they don't have the green ones, they just have the black ones, and I didn't really have much of a choice, so gonna use those for now, and it should be okay until the next coolant change. I have a fresh O-ring on there, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the plug back in, tighten it, and then fill it up with distilled water. Warm the car up, let it cycle, and then drain the distilled water, and then fill it up with coolant. So pretty straightforward process. Let me go ahead and get started. So what you saw me doing was slowly burping the system. I'm doing it with the distilled water so it gets everything through the system as much as it can. Long story short, I'm just doing this for the distilled water, and then I will be doing that again with the coolant. But yeah, it's looking good. It's just one piece of advice is to flip on the AC to max blast, cold. Make sure the AC is on so all the system, so everything's running full capacity. And you can see here it's bubbling, so it's burping itself out. There's a couple of different methods. I usually do this. Is it 100%? Not always, but what it is, the next morning I actually go in and top off the radiator so everything's topped off fully after I'm done. But I'm just going through the cycle process right now. I'll go ahead and get this done, and then show you when I'm doing the final fill.
One pathetic sob story later.
All right, so it looks like the camera died, so I don't know where the footage left off, but I'm gonna record here and try to cut and edit going backwards and see how it comes out. So I apologize if it kind of makes sense, kind of doesn't make sense. The camera died while I was time-lapsing and doing a bunch of other stuff, so this is where I'm gonna pick up where I left off is I drained the distilled water to flush everything out. That's all done. I put the plug at the bottom of the radiator back in. Now I have to fill it. So I have some AMSOIL coolant here, and also have this AMSOIL Dominator coolant boost. So this I've been using for years across with many vehicles. This actually does help, but be sure to read the instructions on the back on what your mix ratio is, and don't overdo it. More does not necessarily mean better in these situations, so you want to just get as close as you can on this mix. And you might be wondering why I'm not using what they call Toyota Red, which is Toyota's OEM coolant. I've used AMSOIL stuff for years, and my XB's never had a problem, so I just keep using it. I know Toyota Red is the recommended one, but this works just fine. Never had a single problem. The capacity of my radiator is a little bit more than the OE because I do have a full aluminum radiator. So the OE radiator is, I would say, generous, about 1/2 inch thick. This one's about 1 inch, 1.5 inches, so a lot more capacity. And the one big thing with these cars, if you have them, is there's no actual real temperature gauge. My car came with one installed already, an aftermarket, gauge that shows the water temp, so I'm good there. But I do a lot of driving between LA and Vegas, and I do go back and forth a lot during the summer. So for me, everything's a little bit of extra protection for the car and a little bit of what I call cheap insurance to make sure I can get to and from my destination without any issues. One of the things I did, I looked underneath to make sure that the thermostat or water pump, nothing's leaking, it's all dry there, so we're good. I know people are in the comments are gonna say, oh, you should change, you're at 180,000 miles, you should be changing your thermostat and water pump. I'm okay for right now. Thermostat was done not too long ago, right before I bought the car from what I'm told, but everything's running solid. It just needs a fluid flush. But my plan is once I hit about 210, I'm probably gonna change the thermostat, water pump and everything. Then I spoke to my friend who was a Toyota tech, David, and he has an XB also, and he's owned several of them and worked on tons of them. And he says generally, if you don't see a leak, don't touch it. It's working just fine. But at the 210 mark, we will change that. And he says that should be about time. But right now, he's like, if everything's dry, everything's good, Mike, just leave it. It shouldn't give you any problems. You take good care of your car overall. So compared to a lot of other people out there, so it should be good. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started and get this done. I'm just letting the car idle and warm up with the AC at full blast to let everything cycle in. So far, I don't see any drips. Don't mind this on the floor. This is actually from just overfilling and just stuff running off. But I do have to go run errands and stuff, so I'll come back and check the levels then. So ideally, what most people do is once they finish this and burping the system, you drive around, whatever. Next morning, car's cold. Open the radiator cap, check inside to see if it's low or whatever, and just top it off, put the cap on, and you should be good to go. Again, the other thing I forgot to mention is, always check the condition of your coolant hoses and everything, make sure nothing's brittle or bloated to where the rubber looks like it's gonna give out. But everything looks good here, everything's solid. I'm just letting everything cycle in, and I gotta clean up. So here's the mess of distilled water, so it's an easy cleanup. Thankfully it's not the coolant, so we're good. But yeah, looks like we're all done here. Hope you enjoyed the video of a quick how-to on changing the coolant on the radiator. Again, sorry for some of the missing content. Battery ran out twice. I don't know what's going on with this camera and the battery setup. I gotta buy new batteries. But yeah, again, thanks again so much for watching. Until next time, you guys take care.